Hello and welcome to Peace Propaganda, a twice-weekly show about living peacefully. This is Adam.
And this is Becky.
Thank you so much for tuning in on the Wednesday episode. Don't touch that dial. Not that there are dials on podcasts. But the Wednesday episode is where we get a little bit more personal. Things get weird, as I like to say. Weird in the best possible way, of course.
Weird in the Becky kind of way.
I've been known to throw some things out there, that's for sure.
In the Becky and Adam kind of way, of course. I didn't want to speak for you, Adam.
Well, as diligent listeners may already know, this is Becky Levin's last show with us here at Peace Propaganda.
Yep, this is going to be my goodbye episode, and so I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a, I guess a walkthrough of my experience doing this podcast, because I think it's been, in some ways, a very unique, or not very unique, that's not a thing, in some ways a unique experience, but in a lot of ways, I think it's also been an experience that a lot of people are starting to have nowadays.
What do you mean by that? Well, you brought in an article, right? Is that
so
kind
actually,
of what you're getting at?
Well, right. So what happened was last week sometime I was made aware of a book called The Celestine Prophecy. I think that's how you pronounce it, by James Redfield. Admittedly, I have not read the book. I do not particularly enjoy reading. And I felt guilty about that for a long time, but then I realized that there are plenty of other ways to get information into your head besides reading, and this society just makes us feel guilty if we don't find that to be a particularly effectual method for our personal brain.
Certainly some people in society will do that, yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share that that's not something worth feeling guilty about if you don't like to read. Anyway, but there is also a major motion picture, also called The Celestine Prophecy, that's based on the book. And so I did watch that, and I got, a general overview of what the main insights are. And what I realized was that the experience that I've had over the last several months of making this podcast is not, while it is unique to me in the specifics, the general outline of what has happened to me and my consciousness is not unique. It's happening to a lot of people, and it's, effectively awakening. It's an expansion of consciousness, and a lot of people are starting to experience it, and so it's pretty interesting. And I just wanted to. There are 9 key insights in the book that sort of lead to this awakening, or are part of the process of the awakening, and I've experienced all of them, and so it's just fascinating to see them documented.
Yeah, it sort of looks like a flow chart.
Yeah, I mean, it's a process. It's an evolutionary process that it's just fascinating to have gone through it, and then my attention was brought to this book, and I'm reading the insights, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, this is exactly what happened to me, like in the exact order that it happened, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
hit me with number 1. I'm sure the listeners are eager to know. How do they achieve enlightenment? So
a summary of the first insight is: we are discovering again that we live in a deeply mysterious world full of sudden coincidences and synchronistic encounters that seem destined. So for me, before I started doing this podcast, I was kind of like, I was pretty miserable and feeling very alone, and like everything was wrong with the world and there was nothing I could do about it. And it wasn't until I kind of started opening up my mind to new things and started, instead of pushing people away, sort of started allowing people in and opening up to new experiences, that I started experiencing these synchronistic events. And the first one was when, one of our guests on the podcast,
Speaking of Vince Martin.
Right. Walked up to me randomly. Just a random guy walked up to me. Turns out he's a libertarian and I'm an anarchist. And he knows another anarchist whose podcast I have already listened to.
Who's that? He sounds handsome.
Well, his name is Adam.
Oh.
And he is handsome. So that was sort of the beginning of the synchronistic events. And when it happened, it was kind of like so coincidental, if you want to call it that it was hard to ignore. And it was kind of like, well, I obviously have to I can't just say no to this. I mean, of course, I want to do a podcast. I want to get my voice out there. And for some reason, everything that has gotten me to this point has like been a weird collision of things. And so that was sort of the beginning of the path for me when synchronistic things started to happening, because I opened up to that possibility.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've certainly experienced that. The more I'm willing to say yes, and we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, the more that you're willing to put yourself out of your own comfort zone, the more new life experiences you will necessarily encounter, which opens up doors that you are then able to walk through.
Right. And so here's the second insight.
Sure.
As more of us awaken to this mystery, we will create a completely new worldview. So the idea behind that is that we've kind of been living in this worldview of matter is everything. So the material world, we've been very materially focused, and we've kind of lost touch with, the question, why are we here? Is it really to collect things, right? Is it really to amass material objects? Or
whoever has the most stuff at the end wins, I thought.
Right. That's kind of been the mantra, right? And I think people are starting to realize that there might be something a little bit deeper, because this doesn't seem to be cutting it in terms of making us happy. So that's the second insight. That's the sort of second realization that I came to, that there's something deeper. I'm pretty sure there's something deeper happening here. So the third insight is we will discover that everything around us, all matter, consists of and stems from energy that we are beginning to see and understand. And I think a lot of you sort of heard me start to make this realization that everything that happens in my life is very energetic in nature, in terms of, like, when I interact with people, I'm either providing them energy by uplifting them, or I'm trying to take their energy by trying to manipulate and control them into doing things that I want them to do. And so, as we awaken, we start to understand that the energy that we come to the world with is very important, and it's not sort of secondary in nature to the material world. It's primary, and it creates the material world.
Yeah, I'm certainly not hostile to that viewpoint. I like it as an analogy for what I've observed. Mm-hmm. I confess that I struggle with the falsifiability of it. It seems difficult to set up an experiment to sort of prove, like a divine energy that exists. But as far as sort of a rubric for explaining how things tend to pan out, I think it's pretty spot on, and we've talked about this in the past. If you're good to people, they'll generally be good back to you.
Right. And so the thing about to understand about these insights is that, nobody's claiming them to be true, or provably true. Mm-hmm. For me, all I can say is, I can't deny my own experience, and my experience has been, precisely this.
Nothing wrong with that.
So yeah, that's really what I'm saying. I'm not trying to, convince anybody of anything. I'm just sharing what my experience has been.
Right on. Well, we got 9 of these. We've just gotten through 3. So we got the music coming up, and we'll be back with number 4 from Peace Propaganda.
I want to take this opportunity to tell you about Sean's Outpost, a homeless outreach program which has provided over 20,000 meals to the homeless in Northwest Florida. They're also funded entirely through Bitcoin donations. They are proving that we can address the problems in our community without the state. without its predatory welfare programs and without its Ponzi money. Recently, Sean's Outpost launched its newest, boldest initiative, Satoshi Forest, a 9-acre homeless sanctuary where they are teaching permaculture, aquaponics, and self-sufficiency to the homeless residents. No one sticks a gun in anyone's face and makes them donate to Sean's Outpost, and yet, every day, people do. Please consider donating to this inspiring cause. Visit seansoutpost.com. That's SEANS outpost.com.
And we are back for the Wednesday episode of Peace Propaganda. I want to remind you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Peace Propaganda and Peace Podcast, respectively. You can listen to us on iTunes, on SoundCloud, and on Stitcher Radio. And be sure to vote for us on the Podcast Land voting contest next week. You may recall during the interview that we had with Mike Margolis from Walking the Earth podcast that there is a contest with the consequences to be determined by popular demand. But we're going to have some fun with that. But we're going to get back into an article that Becky had brought in from a book called The Celestine Prophecy. So, Becky, I believe we were on number 4.
Yeah, so the 4th insight. Oh, and I also want to mention, I at the beginning I said something like, these happened in the same order for me, but that's not totally accurate. They're all kind of tied in. All of these insights kind of came at sort of simultaneously as I started to figure out what I was experiencing. But so I don't want to give the impression that like it's just going to happen all in this order for anyone.
Thank you for clarifying.
All right. Anyway, so the 4th insight here is that from the perspective of this sort of new worldview, that things are more energetic than material, we can start to see that humans have always felt insecure and disconnected from their personal source of energy, and have always tried to gain energy by taking it from others, by dominating others. And that struggle has been responsible for all human conflict in the world today and in history. So basically, our attempts to control other people are our attempts to gain energy, life energy that we need to continue sort of living, but we don't know how to get it for ourselves. And so we sort of leech off of other people. And so what relationships become, and this includes, love relationships, but also relationships between governments and people, things like that, is this kind of constant battle for, you're not giving me enough. You're not giving me enough love. You're not giving me enough attention. You're not giving me enough energy. I need these things from you, and I can't get them from anywhere else. Right? And that's kind of where all this conflict comes from. The fact that, we haven't been able to source our own energy needs.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of what you're describing would be, insecurity and fear.
Yeah.
And people, as you say, in personal relationships tend to look for it. Or maybe not even tend to, but many people will look for it from others and get angry at them when they don't receive it from others. And then again, as you say, this translates perfectly into how government treats its subjects. Mm-hmm. And I like this one. It definitely dovetails nicely with the non-aggression principle and the idea of not aggressing against others.
Right. And the problem with the non-aggression principle is that in order to put it into practice, you need to change your way of being. You need to be able to be your own source of energy, because if you don't have a personal source of energy, you need to aggress against others in order to take theirs, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what that insight is. If we can all, so, and then which, goes right into the 5th insight, which is that the only solution is to cultivate a personal reconnection with that personal source of energy. And when we start to do that, a transformation starts to take place where we are no longer dependent on many of the things in the external world. So, for instance, we start to cut ties to if we were maybe in codependent relationships, unhealthy love relationships, or friendships, whatever, those people start to fall out of our lives because we're just growing. We're transforming into a more self-sufficient being. And, obviously that's the solution to the government thing, because if everybody was self-sufficient, I mean, what would you need a government for, right?
That's true. Well, I mean, and I want to clarify, as we've done before, we had an episode called Keep It Simple. I don't think we're necessarily advocating that everyone is self-sufficient in all of their material needs. A person can't be a lumberjack and a doctor and an architect all at once.
Sure.
But I take your point, certainly from an emotional stability and from an idea of your own mental clarity and security.
Yeah.
You can't count on other people to provide that for you, because ultimately that just gives them a window into manipulating you.
Right. So, yeah, basically the solution to most of the, or like all of the conflict in the world, is to kind of become your own source of energy and life, and not depend on others to provide you what you need to be okay and to be happy.
All right. That was number 6?
That was number 5.
Oh,
so the 6th insight is, in this awareness, we can release our own pattern of controlling and discover a specific truth that we are here to share that helps evolve humanity towards this new level of reality. So this one is really important, because, you can realize all these things, but as long as you don't change yourself, change your patterns and your habits and all the things you've been programmed with, by this society, as long as you continue to behave the way you are, and you continue to try to control the world outside of you and others, nothing will change. Nothing will come of it, right?
Very true.
So, this insight is pretty important, and it definitely was something that started to happen really significantly to me over the course of the last several months, where I just sort of slowly started to realize that my attempts to control things only ever made me miserable. They never were successful in actually getting me what I wanted and making me happy, which was always my end goal. I mean, whenever we're trying to control someone, that's our goal, right? We're trying to make ourselves happier by making the external world be what suits us.
Right, using a person like you would any other resource.
Right. And that's what we tend to do, right? We tend to take instead of giving, because we don't have a source from which to give. And so, yeah, as my patterns of controlling started to fall away, I kind of started to be able to see reality more clearly, and started to be able to see people more clearly for who they were and how they were behaving, and started to be able to see their projections onto me more clearly, because I knew that, if you can step out of the emotional drama, you can just see other people's more clearly, That's
true. And the interesting thing is that it's not even, a person who is, gets used as a resource by another person, a person who isn't able to cope with their reality, is a doormat.
Right.
And in the last episode we were saying nobody likes a doormat. So it's even a two-way street. The person projecting, the person abusing the relationship, or if it's a codependent relationship, when the other person is exercising control, they're not even happy about it.
Right.
It's not something that people want.
Nobody's happy in those kind of relationships. And that's why so many of us are so unhappy, because we're trying to control each other instead of trying to, love each other, basically.
Very true. Very true. Well, we'll be back with the remainder of this list on Becky's last episode right after this.
Hey, this is Becky, host of Peace Propaganda. I know that starting something new is really hard, but it's important to get our message heard. That's why we want to help you promote your liberty-related project.
we're offering free 45-second time spots on Peace Propaganda. That's right, free. So, do you have something that you're trying to promote? Contact us at host.peacepropaganda@gmail.com. That's host.peacepropaganda@gmail.com. You can send us information about your project and we'll share it on the show. We look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back. We are in the last segment of our Wednesday episode. Hope you're enjoying it. As advertised, this is not the listener feedback episode. This is the episode where we get more personal, where we talk about situations about anarchism or freedom or just living a more fulfilling life. And so Becky is talking about a book called The Celestine Insights.
Celestine Prophecy.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Celestine Prophecy. And we were on number 7, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So, and I want to be clear. More specifically, I'm talking about my personal experience of these, because this isn't just like some book that I found and
Right.
thought it was interesting. This was some book that I found and went, holy mother, this is what's happening to me. So it's significant, right? For me.
Thank you for clarifying. Yes.
So the 7th insight is that as we start to share the truth that we're discovering through the process of releasing our controlling patterns, we start to discover an inner intuition that shows us where to go and what to do. And if we only make positive interpretations, it starts to bring a flow of coincidences that opens doors for that message to be shared. So
I have a question about this one.
Yeah, go ahead.
What does it mean if we only make positive interpretations?
So basically, okay, so when something happens, you have a choice. You have a choice of perceiving it as solely negative and say you get in a car accident and you can be like, wow, that really sucks. Now I have to, go pay money to get this fixed, and I got this cut on my arm and blah blah blah. You can view it that way, or you can think to yourself, okay, what can I learn from this? What does this teach me about how I was behaving? What does this teach me about how I want to behave in the future? How can I be an optimist about this event? Because it doesn't do me any good to be negative about it, right? It just makes me miserable.
Yeah, okay. When you explain it like that, that makes a lot of sense. That's a very apropos example that you gave, considering one of my best friends was just in a car accident. He's okay. Nobody worry.
Yeah.
But yes, and he's a listener to the show, so I'm sure he'll be glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to be reminded of that from time to time, that it is direly important to have a positive outlook for what may come.
Yeah. And what's interesting was that for me, I maybe I've always been that way a little bit, but I also had the typical human pattern of, getting down on myself when I'd feel like I'd made a mistake or I'd done something wrong. But as my consciousness started to expand, I started to realize that these things, were teaching me so much that it didn't make sense to look at them from a negative perspective, because there was so much to be gained from them. And so I just sort of naturally started viewing everything from a positive perspective. And it got to the point where I realized that as I was doing that, things were only getting better and better. And so it just was a, self-reinforcing cycle where it was like, okay, well, I just got more and more positive as I went, and my life just became a more and more positive experience.
Of course. Yeah, of course that's going to happen, because then you're focusing on what you can do next instead of what you can't do now.
Right, and you're looking for the opportunities instead of the sort of the pitfalls, I guess.
It's a very entrepreneurial attitude.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes, a good entrepreneur, right?
That's right. That's right.
So that's kind of, the insight there. But yeah, and it Insight 7 also mentions that it starts to bring a flow of coincidences that opens more doors. And that's exactly what started to happen for me. I mean, at this point in my life, it seems like every day is a constant flow of unignorable coincidences that I now don't take as coincidences, but instead take as things that I need to follow. It's like in the beginning of the Matrix, the computer screen says, "Follow the white rabbit," and then the woman shows up at the door with a white rabbit on. That's what they're signifying, right? The kind of, a path will be uncovered to you if you're paying attention and you stay positive and you keep your eyes open. There will be signs. And that's been my experience. And I was raised by two PhDs of biochemistry, two real legit scientists who probably hate that I'm sitting here talking about this kind of stuff. I don't know if
that's their problem. Maybe they should listen to
word.
the entire episode and they'll be convinced
No.
that they shouldn't project that on people.
Yeah, I mean, hate may be a strong word, but what I'm saying is I come from a background that's very, not sort of spiritual or religious in any way. I was raised by a staunch atheist. I've come to these conclusions because they have been my real experience. So I'm not trying, I'm not trying to prove or convince anyone of anything. I'm really just sharing what's been my experience because it's been fascinating to me and it's been totally out of my comfort zone. There was a time even during the show when I wasn't comfortable sharing this stuff because I was like, this is like so far off of the radar of what I'm familiar with thinking. I had to really expand my consciousness and my ability to accept things that I wasn't able to accept before as possibilities.
It's a difficult thing.
Yeah. And so yeah, it's been an interesting experience.
Should we do number 8?
Yeah. So in the eighth insight is that when enough of us enter this sort of evolutionary flow where we're following these coincidences down a path, and we are always giving energy to others instead of trying to dominate them and take their energy, we will naturally build a new culture where everyone evolves into higher levels of consciousness. And because when you and I've said this in another way before on the show that the energy of love attracts and it unifies people. It brings people together, whereas the energy of fear pushes them away and separates them, and it divides and conquers them. And that's basically the idea here, that as we all start to realize how important it is to give energy and lift people up instead of taking energy and tearing them down, we will all unify and join together in this evolution, and kind of, it will just happen naturally because love is such a unifying force.
Well, again, I'm left agreeing with the actions that it promotes, but not necessarily following the spiritualism of it. But that's okay. There's a lot of things that I don't understand or don't follow, but I still agree with.
Yeah.
I can't program a computer. I don't know how it works, but I still like it.
Yeah.
And I like the general message, the thrust of what's being said here, and that's certainly something that I try to incorporate into my everyday life, even if it's not rationalized that way.
Yeah.
So we got number 9, or did you have more to say about that?
No. So the ninth insight is kind of the most exciting to me, and I think it's kind of what I've felt from the very beginning, and I've mentioned it to you in some way or shape or form from the beginning, Adam, and I've also sort of mentioned that it made me uncomfortable to share on the show because it does sound so spiritual or religious or whatever. It sounds very airy-fairy, but I've kind of, I don't know, something has been telling me that this is what's happening. So the insight is, we are effectively participating in the long journey of evolution from the Big Bang to life's ultimate goal, to energize our bodies generation by generation until we walk into a heaven we can finally see. So I know you've heard me.
I would substitute here the creation of the universe for Big Bang. I'm not sure that the science is in on that, but go ahead. What were you about to say?
Well, it doesn't matter if science so we're looking at this is looking at things from a spiritual perspective, not from a scientific perspective. But from a spiritual perspective, we can accept the Big Bang.
Okay.
And so we're the perspective is the whole point of the Big Bang. And this is
Go ahead.
not the truth.
Go ahead.
It's just the experience of some people. But the whole point of the Big Bang was to initiate this process of evolution, and the point of this process of evolution was to get us to return to this original state where we have expanded our consciousness fully. So like,
it sounds Buddhist.
I mean, a lot of it has sort of Buddhist roots, but
not that I'm any expert on Buddhism. But
the reality is that all religions are trying to point to the same thing, and it's this idea that oneness, love and oneness are kind of the center of every religious teaching, right? I mean, Buddha wasn't a Buddhist, Jesus wasn't a Christian, all of these spiritual teachers, they weren't of the religion that people created in order to follow them. What they taught was love, right? And then people sort of mistakenly attached themselves to the physical, material people instead of incorporating the teachings into their lives, right? So that's the nature of the human mind, though. We like to label things and put them in boxes and then focus on the material reality because it's what we can sense with our five senses. It's natural.
It also introduces a fragility to that idea, though. I mean, that's sort of the message behind V for Vendetta, right? You can kill the man, but you can't kill the idea. But as soon as the idea becomes inextricably linked with the man, then the idea loses its potency because you can discredit the man. You can kill the man, and if it's linked in everybody's mind to it, and that's sort of what happened with Christianity, and Buddhism and all that. It becomes about the people involved and not about the ideas involved.
Right. So I know, Adam, you've heard me talk about how I kind of felt at some level that what was happening is we're sort of being birthed into heaven. and it sounds, it used to make me sort of cringe to say it out loud because it's not very scientific or rational or whatever, but the reality is that for all of time where humans have existed, our consciousness has been expanding. And that's what the Renaissance was. That's what the Enlightenment was. That's what this evolution is about. And there's no reason to think it would stop. And so what is the next level of human consciousness? It's this realization that I'm not separate from you, and so to attack you is it's ludicrous. It's to attack myself. And when we all sort of come to that realization, we will step into a heaven that has been here all along, and we just couldn't see.
Beautifully said. Where else would you hear such things but peace propaganda? And from who else would you hear it but Becky Levin? Becky, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to have you. You've brought so much to the show. It's incalculable.
Thank you.
And I'm sure the listeners will agree that the show will miss you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's obviously been a life-changing experience for me. And I want to thank all of our listeners and you, Adam, and everybody else who's been involved in one form or another. I couldn't have done it without you, obviously. And it's been life-changing. So thank you, everyone.
And that does it for the Wednesday, April 2014 episode of Peace Propaganda.
Have a great life.
Somebody came and took your bed, don't worry, be happy. The landlord say your rent is late, he may have to litigate, don't worry.
The uncertainty, self-discovery, the unknown. These are many of the qualities that make life worth living. Well, at least to me. I wouldn't want to live my life knowing that my future was written. My boundaries had been already set. A person's life, their future, hinges on each of 1,000 choices. Living is making choices.